Admiral Hyun-woo Kim stood on the bridge of Earth Defense Station Alpha. He watched the main screen with cold eyes. Space around Earth looked normal at first. Stars dotted the black void like tiny diamonds. But then the ships appeared, one by one. Massive alien vessels dropped out of hyperspace. They were huge beyond anything humans had ever built. Each ship was the size of a small city. Their dark hulls reflected no light. Strange symbols glowed along their sides in colors that hurt. "To look at. How many?" Hyun-woo asked his sensor officer. 47 ships, sir. All dreadnought class or larger." The admiral felt his stomach drop. Earth's entire defense fleet had only 12 ships. They were good ships, built with the best human technology. But against 47 alien dreadnoughts, they might as well be throwing rocks. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," Communications Officer Ji-Hai Park said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked her console. "Put it through." The main screen changed. An alien face appeared. It had gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its mouth was too wide and filled with sharp teeth. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English. "I am Fleet. Commander Vexathari of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species will surrender immediately. Prepare to receive our representative for formal terms." The transmission ended. The alien ships held their position, waiting. Hyun-woo turned to his staff. "Get me the president. Now." On Earth's surface, President Jin-Ho Lee was already in the emergency bunker beneath Seoul. The secure facility buzzed with activity. Military. Officers ran between computer stations. Diplomats worked their phones, trying to contact other human colonies. Scientists studied the alien ships through powerful telescopes. "Mr. President," his aide whispered, "the shuttle is approaching." Through the bunker's reinforced windows, they could see a small alien craft descending through Earth's atmosphere. It was sleek and silver, moving without any visible engines. The ship landed in the designated area outside the bunker. A single figure stepped out. It was tall and thin, wearing flowing robes that seemed to change color as it moved. This alien looked different from the one on the screen. Its skin was pale blue, and it had only 2 eyes, but they were large and completely black. "I am Ambassador Do-Yeon Park," a woman said, stepping forward from the human delegation. She had been Earth's best diplomat for 20 years. If anyone could handle this, it was her. The alien bowed slightly. "I am Ambassador Keltar of the Hegemony. I bring terms from our glorious empire." They met in the bunker's main conference room. The alien sat across from President Lee, Ambassador Park, and General Dong-hyun Yu, head of Earth's military. The boss room was silent except for the soft hum of air recyclers. "Your species has expanded too quickly," Keltar said. Its voice was like music, but the words were harsh. 37 star systems in 200 years. This cannot be allowed." "We've harmed no one," President Lee said. "Our colonies are on empty worlds. We've avoided contact with other species." "That is the problem," Keltar replied. "You expand without permission. You take resources that belong to the hegemony. This ends now." The alien reached into its robes and pulled out a small device. It projected a hologram into the air above the table. The image showed the galaxy, with thousands of stars marked in different colors. "Red stars belong to the hegemony," Keltar explained. "Green stars are client species who pay tribute. Yellow stars are protected reserves. Blue stars are forbidden to all life." President Lee studied the map. Almost every star was colored. The few white ones left were scattered far from human space. "Where does that leave us?" he asked. "You will become a client species. 60% of all resources from your worlds will be sent to the hegemony. 60% of your food, your metals, your energy. 60% of your people will serve in our fleets and colonies." General Yu leaned forward. "That's not negotiation. That's slavery. It is survival," Keltar said calmly. "The alternative is complete destruction. Every human world burned to ash, every human ship destroyed. Your species wiped from existence." Ambassador Park had been quiet, but now she spoke. "How long do we have to decide?" 72 hours. The alien stood and walked back to its shuttle. The humans watched it leave, rising into the sky like a silver arrow. In the hours that followed, the human government worked frantically. They called emergency meetings with colony leaders across human space. They ran computer simulations of possible military responses. They reached out to other species they had met, hoping for allies. The results were not good. Every species they contacted either belonged to the hegemony or was too afraid to help. Computer models showed that Earth's fleet would last maybe 10 minutes against the alien armada. But then Chief Science Officer So Young-han requested an urgent meeting. She arrived at the bunker carrying a sealed briefcase and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to show you something," she said. "Something we found on Kepler 442b. Kepler 442b was one of humanity's outer colonies. The planet was mostly empty, covered in strange ruins that seemed millions of years old. Most people thought they were natural rock formations, but So Young's team had been studying them for months. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a small metal object. It was perfectly smooth and seemed to glow with its own light. "This came from inside the ruins," she said. "When we brought it back to the lab, it activated. It showed us things, recordings, messages." She placed the object on the table. Immediately, the room filled with holographic images. They showed a galaxy full of life, but not the life they knew today. These were different beings, tall and graceful, with technology beyond imagination. "We call them the architects," So Young explained. "They lived here millions of years ago. They built the ruins on our colonies. They built things here on Earth, too, hidden deep underground." The images showed the architects working on countless worlds. They were terraforming planets, guiding evolution, building vast machines that spanned star systems. "What happened to them?" President Lee asked. "They left, or transformed. The recordings aren't clear, but they left something behind. Instructions, technologies. They've been waiting for someone to find them." General Yu stared at the glowing object. "Are you saying we have access to this technology?" "Some of it. The object has been teaching us, slowly, carefully. It's like it's testing us, making sure we're ready." "Ready for what?" So Young smiled for the first time in days. "To take back what's ours." The meeting went late into the night. Plans were made. Orders were sent to secret facilities across human space. The architect ruins were suddenly buzzing with activity as teams of scientists and engineers worked to unlock ancient secrets. 48 hours after the alien ultimatum, President Lee called another meeting. This time, it was broadcast to every human colony, every ship in space, every person who could receive the signal. "Citizens of humanity," he began, "we have been given a choice. Submit to slavery or face destruction. But there is a third option. We choose to stand and fight. We choose freedom." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "To the galactic hegemony, we send this message. Withdraw from our space within 72 hours or face the consequences. Earth and her colonies will bow to no empire. We are the children of the architects and we remember." The broadcast ended. Across human space, people watched the alien ships through telescopes and sensors. Some of the ships moved closer to human worlds, preparing for battle. Others seemed to hesitate, as if their crews were discussing something urgent. Admiral Hyun-woo Kim stood on his bridge again, watching the enemy fleet. His own ships had been quietly modified over the past 2 days. They didn't look different. From the outside, but inside, architect technology hummed with power. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're getting multiple transmissions from across the galaxy. Other species are asking about our message. They want to know about the architects." The admiral nodded. The plan was working. Fear was spreading. Through the hegemony, after millions of years, the name of the architects still carried power. "Maintain position," he ordered. "Let them come to us." In the depths of space, the alien fleet began to move toward Earth. But for the first time in the hegemony's long history, they were not certain of victory. Something had changed. The humans had found something that made them dangerous. The countdown to war had begun. Dr. Min-Soo Choi stood in the deepest laboratory on Earth. It was 5 kilometers underground, carved into solid rock beneath the Korean mountains. The lab had been built in secret over the past 6 months. Now it hummed with activity as dozens of scientists worked around the clock. The center of the lab held something that shouldn't exist. It was a perfect sphere, 3 meters across, made of a material that seemed to absorb light. The sphere floated in the air without any support. Sometimes it pulsed with soft blue light. When it did, the scientists would gather around their computers, recording everything. "The signal is getting stronger," said Dr. Hae-won Kim, Min-Soo's research partner. She pointed at the data flowing across her screen. "It's definitely responding to the alien ships." Min-Soo nodded. They had found the sphere 6 weeks ago, buried beneath Seoul. But it had been dormant until the hegemony fleet arrived. Now it was waking up, and it was trying to communicate. "Sir, we're getting something new," called out Dr. Young-Jun Lee from across the room. "The sphere is projecting again." The air above the sphere shimmered. Suddenly, the lab was filled with holographic images. They showed Earth, but not as it was today. This was Earth millions of years ago, covered in vast cities that reached into the sky. Graceful beings moved through the streets. They were tall and elegant, with silver skin and large eyes. "The architects," Min-Soo whispered. The images changed. Now they showed the architects working on massive projects. They were building structures the size of mountains. They were changing the very shape of continents. And they were doing something else. They were hiding things. All across Earth, the architects had built hidden chambers. They put them under cities, inside mountains, beneath the ocean floor. Each chamber contained technology that could reshape reality itself. "My God," Hae-won breathed. "They turned the entire planet into a storage facility." The hologram zoomed in on specific locations. There was a chamber beneath New York, another under Tokyo, one more under London. The images showed dozens of locations. "Across every continent. We need to contact the government immediately," Min-Soo said. But even as he spoke, he knew the government was already moving. Captain Eun Ji-song crouched in the ruins on Kepler 442b. Her team had been working for 36 hours straight, following instructions from the architect device. They had found the entrance to the main facility, hidden beneath what looked like a natural rock formation. The door was made of the same dark material as the sphere on Earth. When Yoonji placed her hand on it, the door simply faded away. Inside, the facility was vast. Corridors stretched in every direction, lit by panels that glowed softly blue. "Captain," her engineer said, "these readings don't make sense. The energy output from this place is off the charts." They followed the main corridor deeper into the facility. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Sometimes the symbols would glow and data would flow directly into their minds. It was strange and frightening, but somehow they understood what the architects were trying to tell them. "Their instructions," Yoonji said. "They're teaching us how to use their technology." Her team found the central chamber. It was enormous, big enough to hold a starship. In the center stood a pillar of pure light. Around it, dozens of smaller devices hummed with power. "This is it," the engineer said, reading his scanner. "This is what's been sending the signals to our colonies. It's some kind of galactic communication network." Yoonji approached the pillar carefully. When she got close, it pulsed brighter. Suddenly, her mind was filled with information. She could see every human colony, every ship in space. She could see the hegemony fleet around Earth. And she could see something else. Other signals, coming from across the galaxy. Other species were watching, waiting to see what would happen. On Earth, General Dong-Hyun Yu stood in the command center beneath Mount Fuji. The facility had been built to look like a geological research station. In reality, it was the most advanced military installation humanity had ever constructed. "Status report," he ordered. "All architect sites are active, sir," his aide replied. "We've accessed 17 facilities across Earth, another 23 on the colonies." The main screen showed a map of human space. Each architect facility was marked with a blue dot. As you watched, more dots appeared. The network was spreading, connecting facilities that had been sleeping for millions of years. "What about the modifications to our ships?" 60% complete, sir. Engineer Hyojin Baek reports the lunar shipyards are working at maximum capacity. Yu nodded. The shipyards had been busy since the alien ultimatum. Every human warship was being retrofitted with architect technology. The changes were incredible. New weapons that could bend space itself. Shields that existed in parallel dimensions. Engines that could move ships faster than anything in the galaxy. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're getting reports from Intelligence Director Ye-Jin Ko. She says the message is spreading." The message was simple but powerful. Ye-Jin had used every spy network, every communication channel humanity had, built over 2 centuries of space travel. The message reached species across the galaxy. The architects have returned, and they remember everything. The effect was immediate. Across hegemony space, subject species began to whisper. The architects were legends, stories told in secret. They were the ones who had seeded life across the galaxy. They were the builders, the teachers, the guardians. And according to legend, they would return one day to judge what their children had become. Fleet Admiral Young-Soo Kwon stood on the bridge of the EDS Incheon, humanity's newest battleship. The ship looked the same from the outside, but inside everything had changed. The bridge was now connected directly to an architect control system. Kwon could feel the ship's new capabilities like extensions of his own body. "Admiral," his weapons officer said, "the new systems are online. All ships report ready." Kwon looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was positioned in defensive formations around Earth and the major colonies. To the hegemony, it probably looked like they were preparing for a last stand. In reality, they were preparing for something the galaxy had never seen. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the hegemony fleet." The alien commander appeared on the screen. It was the same four-eyed creature from before, Fleet Commander Vexathari. "Human Admiral," Vexathari said, "your time has expired. Submit now, and your deaths will be quick." Kwon smiled coldly. "We gave you 72 hours to withdraw. You chose to stay. That was a mistake. You cannot threaten the hegemony with your primitive technology," Vexathari snarled. "Primitive," Kwon laughed. "Let me show you something." He nodded to his tactical officer. On every human ship, architect systems came online. The effect was visible even from space. The ships began to glow with blue light. Reality seemed to bend around them. On the hegemony flagship, alarms began to sound. Their sensors were going crazy, detecting energy readings that shouldn't be possible. "What are you?" Vexathari demanded. "We are the children of the architects," Kwon replied. "And you have forgotten your place." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, other species watched the confrontation through long-range sensors. Many of them had similar legends about the architects. They had all dismissed them as myths. Now they weren't so sure. Dr. Soo-Jin Kim worked frantically in the deep facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. This was the largest architect installation on Earth, built into the ocean floor itself. The main chamber was the size of a city, filled with technology that humanity was only beginning to understand. "The archive is responding," she called out to her team. "It's opening the restricted files." The archive was the architect's great library. It contained the complete history of the galaxy, going back millions of years. It held the genetic patterns of every species, the locations of every habitable world, the secrets of every civilization. As the files opened, Sujin gasped. The data showed the true history of the galaxy. The hegemony species weren't the natural rulers they claimed to be. They were latecomers, primitives who had found a few pieces of architect technology and used it to conquer their neighbors. "Look, at this," one of her assistants said, pointing at a genetic scan. "Every species in the hegemony shares common markers. They're all descendants of architect genetic experiments." Sujin studied the data. It was true. The hegemony species, the client races, even humanity itself, they were all connected. They were all children of the architects, guided and shaped over millions of years. But there was something else in the data, something that made her blood run cold. The archive showed why the architects had left. They hadn't died or disappeared. They had transcended, moving to a higher dimension to escape something terrible, something that was coming back. "We need to warn them," she whispered. "The hegemony doesn't know what they're dealing with." But it was too late. The battle was about to begin. Commander Tae Young-jung led his strike team through a portal that shouldn't exist. One moment they were in a facility on Mars. The next, they were standing in the throne room of the hegemony capital on Veltar Prime. The portal technology was one of the architect's greatest achievements. It allowed instant travel across any distance. Young's team was using it to appear simultaneously on 12 different hegemony worlds. The first hegemony attack came without warning. Massive energy beams tore through space, striking Earth's orbital defenses. The weapons were powerful enough to destroy mountains. They should have cut through human shields like paper. Instead, the beams simply vanished. Captain Ji-hwan Park watched from the bridge of the EDS Seoul as the alien weapons fired again and again. Each time, the energy disappeared into the strange blue glow that surrounded the human ships. "Sir," his weapons officer said, "the architect's shields are holding perfectly. The enemy fire isn't even registering on our sensors." Ji-hwan nodded. "The shields didn't just stop incoming attacks. They sent them somewhere else, into parallel dimensions where the energy could do no harm. It was technology beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen." "Target the lead dreadnought," he ordered. "Fire." The Soul's main weapon activated. It didn't look like much, just a pulse of blue light. But when it hit the alien ship, something impossible happened. The massive dreadnought simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, a kilometer-long warship bristling with weapons. The next moment there was empty space. "What happened to it?" the weapons officer asked. "It's still there," Ji-hwan replied, studying the architect weapon display. "Just not in this dimension. The weapon moved it sideways through reality. Across the battle space, other human ships opened fire. Each shot sent an enemy vessel into dimensional exile. The hegemony fleet, which had numbered 47 ships, began shrinking rapidly. Fleet Commander Vex Thari stared at his tactical display in horror. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost 15 ships. His weapons couldn't even scratch the human vessels. His remaining ships were firing frantically, but their beams just vanished into nothing. "Sir," his science officer said, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions around Earth. The humans aren't just using advanced technology. They're manipulating the basic structure of space-time." Vexathari had seen many battles. In his long career, he had conquered dozens of species for the hegemony. But this was different. This wasn't a battle between two fleets. This was primitives with sticks trying to fight gods. "All ships, retreat to the edge of the system," he ordered. "We need to regroup and call for reinforcements." But as his fleet tried to withdraw, they found their path blocked. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, using the same portal technology that had carried strike teams to hegemony worlds. The aliens were surrounded. On Earth, Dr. Soo-Jin Kim stood in the archive chamber, her hands moving across controls that responded to her thoughts. The architect systems had fully awakened now, and they were teaching her things that human science couldn't even imagine. The weapon systems are only the beginning, she told the other scientists. Look at this. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing the galaxy, but these weren't normal star maps. They showed the hidden connections between worlds, the quantum networks that linked every planet, every star, every particle of matter. The architects didn't just build technology, she explained. They built the galaxy itself into one massive machine. Every star is a component. Every planet is a circuit, and now we have access to the control system. Dr. Wu Jin Lee, one of her colleagues, stared at the displays. Are you saying we can control stars themselves? Not just control them, Su Jin replied. We can move them, remake them, turn them into weapons if we need to. She touched a control panel, and one of the displays zoomed in on a distant star system. With a gentle mental command, she made a small adjustment to the star's output. Light years away, the star brightened slightly. Any planets in that system would now have a longer growing season. The hegemony has been fighting over scraps, she said. They fight for resources, for territory, for slaves to work their mines. They never understood that the galaxy itself is the real prize. General Subin Kang received the report while standing in the command center beneath Mount Everest. This facility was even more secret than the others, built into the mountain itself, using architect construction techniques. From here, she could coordinate military operations across human space. Ma'am, her aide said, Dr. Kim reports that the stellar manipulation systems are online. She's asking for permission to demonstrate our capabilities. Subin studied the tactical situation. The hegemony fleet around Earth was trapped, but reports were coming in of larger fleets moving toward human space. Dozens of species were joining the fight, some on humanity's side, others still loyal to the Empire. Do it, she ordered, but make it a demonstration they'll never forget. The target was a barren moon orbiting Jupiter. It was lifeless, airless, just a ball of rock and ice. Dr. Kim's team selected it carefully to make sure no one would be hurt. Across the solar system, every ship with sensors watched as the architect's systems activated. Space around the moon began to bend and twist. Reality itself seemed to fold like paper. And then, slowly, the moon began to move. It wasn't pushed or pulled. It simply relocated itself to a different orbit, traveling millions of kilometers in the space of a few minutes. The gravitational forces involved should have torn it apart. Instead, it arrived at its new position completely intact. Message 2. All ships, Subin announced. That was a small demonstration. We can move planets, stars, entire star systems if needed. The hegemony fleet has one last chance to withdraw peacefully. The response was immediate. Half of the remaining alien ships simply vanished, jumping to hyperspace as fast as their engines could carry them. The others stayed, but their formation became much more defensive. Commander Tae-young Jung materialized on the bridge of a hegemony cruiser. His strike team appeared around him, weapons ready. But instead of opening fire, they just stood there. The alien crew stared at them in terror. They had heard the reports from other ships. Humans were appearing everywhere, impossible to stop, impossible to predict. We're not here to fight you, Jung announced. We're here to give you information. His team activated their equipment. Data began flowing into the ship's computers, but this wasn't a virus or an attack. It was the complete archive files on this particular alien species. The crew watched in amazement as their true history unfolded. They learned about their ancestors, their planet's real past, their connection to the architects. They saw how the hegemony had lied to them, used them, treated them as expendable tools. Your choice, Jung said simply. Continue serving an empire that considers you slaves, or join us in building something better. Similar scenes played out on ships across the fleet. Human strike teams appeared, shared information, and vanished. They never fired a shot, never threatened anyone. They just showed the truth and let people decide for themselves. Within hours, the hegemony fleet was falling apart from within. Entire ships switched sides. Others simply left, their crews no longer willing to fight for a cause they had learned was built on lies. But not everyone was ready to give up. The core hegemony species, the ones who had built the empire, still believed they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They gathered their most loyal fleets and prepared for one last massive assault on human space. Dr. Woo-Jin Lee made his discovery while studying the deepest archive files. He had been searching for information about architect, weapons, and defenses. What he found was much more disturbing. They left because something was coming, he told the emergency council meeting. The architects didn't disappear or die. They evolved, transcended to a higher dimension. But they did it to escape something. President Jin-Ho Lee leaned forward. Escape what? An invasion from outside the galaxy. Something that consumes entire star systems. The archive calls them the Devourers. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity had inherited incredible power, but they had also inherited an incredible responsibility. When? President Lee asked. The calculations aren't exact, but based on the archive data, they're less than a century away. The architects left all this technology here because they knew someone would need it when the Devourers returned. General Yu studied the data on his tablet. So the hegemony, this whole war, it's just a distraction. The real threat is still coming. Exactly, Wu Jin replied. We need to unite the galaxy, prepare defenses, get ready for something that made the architects themselves run away. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Quan. The largest hegemony fleet in history was approaching human space. Over 300 ships, led by the Empire's most fanatical commanders. They're calling it the Final Crusade, Quan reported. They plan to destroy every human world, then hunt down any species that supported us. President Lee looked around, the room at his advisors. They had come so far in just a few days. They had unlocked the secrets of the architects, gained power beyond imagination, begun to free the galaxy from tyranny. But the real test was still ahead. Can we stop them? He asked. General Subin Kang smiled grimly. Sir, we can do more than stop them. We can show the galaxy exactly what happens when you threaten the children of the architects. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to every species in the galaxy. Tell them to watch their sensors carefully. They're about to see something that will change everything. In space around human worlds, the architect defense systems came fully online. 6 months had passed since the hegemony's defeat at Earth. The galaxy was a very different place now. Where once there had been a single massive empire, now there were dozens of free species working together in something called the Galactic. Assembly Ambassador Kyung-Ho Nam sat in the Great Meeting Hall on Kepler 438c, a neutral world chosen as the Assembly's headquarters. Around him, representatives from 43 different species debated the new galactic constitution. Most of them were working together well, sharing technology and resources for the first time in centuries. But not everyone was happy with the changes. The Vorthak demand recognition of our historical claims, thundered Ambassador Grixtalk, his massive claws scraping the floor. The Vorthak were one of the core hegemony species, bred for war and conquest. They had lost their empire, but they hadn't lost their pride. Your historical claims were built on conquest and slavery, replied Ambassador Yelsina of the Mordai, a species that had been enslaved by the Vorthak for 300 years. The Assembly will not honor such things. Kyung-Ho watched the argument with careful eyes. This was the same fight that had been happening for months. The former rulers of the hegemony couldn't accept that their empire was gone. The former slaves wanted justice, sometimes revenge. Peace, Kyung-Ho said, his voice carrying across the hall. When he spoke, people listened. Humanity had earned that respect by freeing the galaxy. We're not here to punish the past. We're here to build a better future. Easy words from the species that destroyed our rightful order, Grixtalk snarled. You humans think your ancient toys make you our masters now. "We don't want to be your masters," Kyung-ho replied calmly. "We want to be your allies. The galaxy faces a threat greater than any empire. We need to work together to survive it." But Grixtok had already left the hall, followed by several other Vorthak representatives. The negotiations would continue without them as they had for weeks. After the session ended, Kyung-ho walked to the secure communication room. A hologram of President Jin-ho Lee appeared, calling from Earth. "How bad is it?" the president asked. "The Vorthak are gathering their remaining fleets," Kyung-ho reported. "Intelligence suggests they're planning something big. They can't accept that the Empire is over. Can we stop them diplomatically?" Kyung-ho shook his head. "They don't want to talk. They want to fight. Their entire culture is built on the idea that might makes right. They see our offer of alliance as weakness." President Lee sighed. "Then we'll have to show them they're wrong, again." The Vorthak supremacy, as they now called themselves, had been preparing for months. They had gathered every loyal ship, every species that still believed in the old ways. Their fleet was smaller than the original hegemony armada, but it was still formidable. 200 ships, crewed by the most fanatic supporters of the Empire. Supreme Commander Kraltox stood on the bridge of their flagship, the Dominator. He was old, even by Vorthak standards, and had spent his entire life in service to the Empire. He would rather die than see his people reduced to equals with the species they had once ruled. "Status report," he growled. "All fleets are in position," his aide reported. "We have forces moving toward 3 human colonies simultaneously. They cannot defend them all." Kraltox studied the tactical display. The plan was simple, but brutal. Strike at multiple human worlds at once, force them to spread their forces thin, then destroy them piece by piece. Without human protection, the other species would fall back in line. "Begin the assault," he ordered. The attack started at the human colony on Gliza, 667C. 20 Vorthak ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the orbital stations. The colonists had maybe 10 minutes before the bombardment reached the surface. Commander In-Young Shin was ready for them. Her ship, the EDS Busan, had been waiting in dimensional space, hidden from normal sensors. When the Vorthak fleet appeared, she brought her task force into normal space directly behind them. "All ships, engage," she ordered. The battle was over in minutes. The human ships, now fully equipped with architect technology, moved through the Vorthak formation like wolves. Through sheep. Enemy vessels simply vanished, sent to dimensional exile one by one. But this was just the beginning. On Earth, Dr. Woo Jin Lee worked frantically in the archive chamber. The discovery he had made was disturbing beyond words. While studying the architect records about the Devourers, he had found something unexpected. "They're not just coming to destroy us," he told the emergency council. "They're coming home." President Lee frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Devourers aren't aliens from another galaxy. They're architects, or what the architects became when they tried to transcend to higher dimensions." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. The greatest threat to the galaxy was the dark side of their own inheritance. "The transcendence process went wrong," Wu Jin continued. "Instead of evolving to a higher state, they became something else, something that consumes matter and energy to fuel its existence. They've been eating other galaxies for millions of years." "Can we stop them?" asked General Yu. "Maybe. The archive contains the original transcendence research. If we can understand what went wrong, we might be able to reverse it, or at least defend against it. But that research would take time, and time was something they might not have." The Vorthak attack was escalating, and more species were being forced to choose sides. Supreme Commander Kraltox was becoming desperate. His surprise attacks had failed. Human ships seemed to appear out of nowhere, armed with weapons that made no sense. Half his fleet was already gone, sent to whatever dimension the humans used as a prison. "Sir," his science officer said, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the Sol system. The humans are preparing something big." Kralthok studied the sensor data. Around Earth, space itself was beginning to glow. The energy readings were off the charts, beyond anything their instruments could measure properly. "What are they doing?" "I don't know, sir, but whatever it is, it's using the entire solar system as a power source." On Earth, General Subin Kang stood in the deepest command center, surrounded by architect control systems that responded to her thoughts. The technology was so advanced that it felt like magic, but she was beginning to understand how it worked. "The stellar manipulation systems are fully charged," Dr. Kim reported. "We can demonstrate our capabilities whenever you're ready." Subin nodded. The demonstration would be visible across the galaxy. Every species with sensors would see it. Every ship in space would detect it. The message would be clear. Humanity had power beyond imagination, and they weren't afraid to use it. "Begin," she ordered. The target was a dead star system, 20 light-years, from Earth. It had been chosen carefully, empty of life, useless for colonization. The star itself was a red dwarf, barely giving off any heat. Across human space, architect installations activated simultaneously. The quantum networks that connected every atom in the galaxy resonated with power. Reality itself began to bend. Supreme Commander Kralthox watched his sensors in horror as the impossible happened. 20 light-years away, a star was moving. Not orbiting, not drifting, moving deliberately, changing course like a ship. "By the void," his science officer whispered. "They're steering a star." The red dwarf accelerated, moving faster and faster until it was traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. It had moved from one end of its system to the other in a matter of hours. "All ships," Kralthox ordered, his voice shaking. "Retreat immediately. Full speed to the galactic rim." But even as his fleet fled, he knew it was too late. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could move stars themselves. What hope did any fleet have against such power? Across the galaxy, the demonstration had the intended effect. Species that had been considering joining the Vorthak rebellion suddenly changed their minds. Even the most aggressive cultures understood that you couldn't fight beings who could throw stars at you. President Haiwan Park addressed the reformed Galactic Assembly from Earth. The session was broadcast to every inhabited world, every ship in space. "People of the galaxy," she began, "we stand at a crossroads. We can continue the old ways of empire and conquest, or we can work together to face the challenges ahead." She paused, letting her words sink in. Behind her, a holographic display showed the approaching threat at the galactic rim. The Devourers will arrive in less than 50 years. They will not distinguish between former rulers and former slaves. They will consume everything in their path unless we stop them together. The display changed, showing humanity's plans for galactic defense. Massive stations at the rim, powered by entire star systems. Fleets armed with architect technology. Weapons that could restructure matter itself. We offer this technology freely to any species willing to join us, not as subjects, but as equals. Together we can build defenses that will protect not just our galaxy, but every galaxy the Devourers threaten. The response was immediate. One by one, species across the galaxy announced their willingness to join the defense effort. Even some of the former hegemony core worlds began to reconsider their positions. Captain Si-Young John stood on the bridge of the EDS Magellan as it approached the galactic rim. 3 years had passed since the great demonstration. The galaxy was united as it had never been before. Director Jaemin Oh stood on the observation deck of Defense Station Prime, watching the massive construction project taking shape in the void. The station was enormous, bigger than most moons. It orbited a specially modified star at the galaxy's edge, drawing power directly from the stellar core. Around it, thousands of ships from dozens of species worked together, building the first line of defense against the Devourers. "Status report," Jamin requested. "Station 7 is 80% complete," his aide replied. "Station 12 came online this morning. We now have 15 operational defense platforms along the rim." Jamin nodded. Each station was armed with weapons that could destroy small moons. More importantly, they were connected by the Architect Quantum Network, allowing them to coordinate their fire across thousands of light years instantly. But he knew it might not be enough. The reports from the Deep Space Scouts were getting worse every month. Dr. Ha Young-yoon worked in the research facility buried deep inside Defense Station Prime. Her team had been studying the Devourer threat for 3 years, trying to understand exactly what they were facing. "The quantum resonance is definitely increasing," she told her research partner, Dr. Junseo Kim. "Whatever the Devourers are doing out there, it's affecting space-time itself." Junseo studied the data flowing across his screens. "They're not just traveling toward us. They're changing the structure of reality as they move, making it easier for them to exist in our dimension." Ha Young felt a chill. The Architect records had described the Devourers as beings that existed partially outside normal space-time. That was what made them so dangerous. They could attack from directions that didn't exist, use weapons that ignored the laws of physics. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. "At current rate of approach, 47 years. But if they keep accelerating the quantum changes, they could be here much sooner." The research was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. Dr. Woo Jin Lee appeared on the holographic display, calling from the main archive facility. "We've made a breakthrough," he announced. "We've figured out what went wrong with the original transcendence process." Ha Young leaned forward. This was what they had been hoping for. If they could understand the Architect failure, they might be able to reverse it. "The Architects tried to evolve their consciousness beyond physical form," Woo Jin explained. "But they made a mistake. Instead of transcending, they inverted. They became beings that can only exist by consuming the quantum energy of matter and consciousness." "Can we reverse the process?" Junseo asked. "Theoretically, yes, but it would require enormous amounts of energy, more than we can generate with conventional means." Ha Young understood immediately. "You're talking about using stars themselves as power sources. Not just stars, entire star systems, maybe entire galactic regions. The energy requirements are beyond anything we've ever attempted." Admiral Sung-ho Kim commanded the first truly integrated galactic fleet. His flagship, the GDS Unity, was crewed by representatives from 23 different species. They worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the old hegemony system. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we're detecting massive spatial distortions at grid reference 77 Alpha." Sung-ho studied the tactical display. They were patrolling the outer rim, watching for early signs of Devourer activity. What they had found was disturbing. "It's a scout probe," his science officer announced. "Definitely Devourer technology, but much smaller than the main constructs. The object was only the size of a building, but it was scanning everything within a dozen light years. Worse, it was sending data back to the approaching fleet. "All ships, attack formation," Sung-ho ordered. "Destroy that probe before it can report back." The battle was brief, but intense. The Devourer probe had defenses that bent reality around it, making it hard to target. But the combined fleet's Architect weapons eventually broke through, sending the probe into dimensional exile. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the direction the probe was sending its data." The message was in multiple languages, broadcasting across all frequencies. It was from Supreme Commander Kralthox of the Vorthak. But he sounded different. Changed. "People of the galaxy," the message began, "you follow false prophets. The humans have led you astray with their stolen technology. The true masters of this galaxy are returning, and they will show you the path to transcendence." Sung-ho felt his blood run cold. The Vorthak weren't just helping the Devourers. They had been converted somehow, turned into servants of the enemy. Lieutenant Eun-Soo Han was monitoring communications at the main listening post on Kepler 4440C when she detected something unusual. Deep space transmissions coming from the direction of the galactic core. "Sir," she called to her supervisor, "I'm picking up signals from the inner systems. Multiple sources, all using the same encryption." The supervisor, Commander Park Jae-sung, came over to her station. "Can you break the encryption?" "Already working on it, sir. The patterns look familiar. I think it's based on old hegemony military codes." As the messages decoded, their content became clear. Sleeper agents across the galaxy were activating, preparing for the Devourer arrival. They were sabotaging defense stations, spreading disinformation, preparing landing sites for the invasion. "Get me a direct line to Earth," Commander Park ordered. "Priority Alpha." Within minutes, the information was flowing to defense headquarters on Earth. The enemy wasn't just approaching from outside the galaxy. They had allies already inside, working to weaken the defenses from within. Captain Young-Mi Ko stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel GDS Horizon, staring at the impossible sight before them. They were investigating reports of strange activity near the galactic center when they found it. A massive structure was emerging from the black hole at the galaxy's heart. It was clearly artificial, built from materials that shouldn't be able to exist so close to the event horizon. "Captain," her science officer said, "I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. This isn't architect technology or devourer construction. It's something else entirely." As they watched, the structure continued to grow, fed by matter falling into the black hole. But instead of being destroyed, the matter was being converted into something new, something that pulsed with its own internal light. "We need to get closer," Young-Mi decided. "If this is connected to the Devourer threat, we need to understand it." But as they approached, the structure began to respond. Beams of energy reached out toward their ship, not attacking, but scanning. And then, impossibly, they heard a voice. "Children of the architects," the voice said, speaking directly into their minds, "you have done well, but the test is not over. The galaxy must choose its own path to transcendence." The revelation changed everything. The black hole structure wasn't devourer technology. It was something the architects had built before they left, a final test for their children. The devourers weren't just enemies to be fought. They were part of the test itself. On Earth, the Emergency Council met in the deepest archive chamber. President Hai-Wan Park listened as the exploration reports were presented, trying to understand what they meant. "The architects didn't just leave us technology," Dr. Woo-Jin Lee explained. "They left us a choice. Face the devourers and destroy them, proving we've learned nothing from their mistakes, or find a way to save them, to reverse the transcendence, failure, and restore them to what they once were." "Can it be done?" the president asked. "The galactic network we've built to defend against them could be repurposed," Dr. Ha Young-yoon said via hologram from the RIM stations. "Instead of weapons, we could use it as a massive transcendence correction system." "The risk is enormous," General Subin Kang warned. "If we fail, we lose our defenses, and the galaxy is consumed." President Park considered the options. Across the galaxy, billions of beings waited for humanity's decision. They had united the galaxy, given them hope, shown them a better way. Now, they had to choose between safety and redemption. "Send a message to every defense station, every ship in the fleet," she ordered. "We're going to try to save them." The final confrontation came sooner than expected. The Devourer fleet, aided by Vorthak traders, accelerated their approach. They would arrive not in decades, but in months. Admiral Sung-Ho Kim watched from the Bridge of the Unity as the massive enemy constructs emerged from hyperspace at the galaxy's edge. Each one was the size of a small planet, covered in weapons that could unmake matter itself, But the galaxy was ready. Defense stations powered up along the rim. Ships from dozens of species took their positions, and at the center of it all, humanity's modified architect network prepared for its greatest test. All stations report ready, his communications officer announced. Begin the Transcendence Protocol, Sung Ho ordered. Across the galaxy, every architect installation activated simultaneously. The quantum network that connected every star, every planet, every particle of matter began to resonate with healing energy instead of destructive force. The effect on the Devourers was immediate. Their ships, which existed partially outside normal, space-time began to stabilize. The twisted energy that drove them started to calm.